Yeah, also. So if anybody can tell me if you can hear, yesterday there was some problems with the microphone. So, let's see. Hi everyone. It's so much fun. You get to talk and you can write them little emoticons. So, okay. So let's start. Okay, so the topic today is delusions. And if you read... Hi Adele. If you read up on delusions in other places, so you'll hear that a delusion is something that a person believes despite evidence to the contrary, despite the fact that there's a lot of evidence that suggests that it's not the case. And delusions persist, even though you present people with the evidence that shows them that it's not correct. And there's delusions with two people involved, two people, it's called folie à trois, à deux. It's like a folly of two people strengthen each other's delusions. And there's all kinds of strange things. For instance, it's related to a type of Munchausen syndrome, where I actually have a patient like that now, that he's certain that he has MS. He doesn't have anything. There's nothing at all. But he's in a wheelchair already. He has nothing.
Did you go to the doctor?
He has a problem, but it's not MS.
Had he gone to a doctor?
He has no physical problems.
Okay.
But he's so convinced of himself. There's phantom limb syndrome, that people feel that they have a limb even though they don't. There's all kinds of different variations on delusions. Some of them are cognitive, some of them are emotional, some of them are behavioral. It's very complex task, issue. But what we want to get into today is that there are delusions that psychology, Western psychology, doesn't talk about. If only for the reason that if you don't have faith, then these are not a delusion. But actually, they prevent a lot of the things that we do talk about, these delusions. And to introduce the topic, we have to go back into last week's Parsha. Last week's Parsha, B'Shalach, that we just read on Shabbos, it tells us about the splitting of the sea. And one of the questions that's asked is, if you read in the Gemara, you see that the sages prove that they went in on one side and they came out on the same side, meaning they never crossed the sea. Right? There was no crossing of the Red Sea. The Red Sea is also not the Red Sea that you know in Eilat. It's not the extension of the Indian Ocean. It's a reed. Really, it's Yam Suf. It's a reed sea, and I don't know how big it was. I guess it was big enough that it would take some time to go around it, but it's not that big. And in the end,
Egyptians were swallowed up by it.
What? Okay, so 600 vehicles can be swallowed up by it. It's not that big. I assume it was something at the size of the Kinneret, something like that. So they go in on the same side and they come out on the same side. So what's the whole point of the exercise? So one simple explanation is that it wasn't meant to save them in the sense of getting them across to the other side. It was meant to save them in the sense of getting rid of the Egyptians. That the Egyptians drowned. So that purpose was served. But still the question remains, if that's all you wanted to do, Hashem, so just kill the Egyptians. The same way you did it until now with all the plagues. Why this special thing with going into the water and the water becoming land, and this being this great miracle that now becomes the symbol of the Exodus, the splitting of the Red Sea? So the answer that's given in the Pneumius Torah, in the inner dimension of Torah, is that the whole point of the exercise was really to churn water into land. Why? Because water signifies, as we'll see, the delusion of this world. There's a lot of delusions that this world presents before us, and you have to split it open. You have to show what's underneath. If you show one time what's underneath, you won't be fooled again. Okay? It's very important that you see it once. Once you see it clearly, even just once, you see the land under the water, the land that's being concealed by the oceans. And the oceans, again, are a symbol for this world, for the way that this world is. If you once see what's underneath, what's hidden underneath, then you won't be fooled again. Then you'll know that what you're seeing on top is nothing. Another way of saying it is that when you look at the ocean from the beach, it looks like it's a barren wasteland. There's nothing alive. But the moment that you go in, you suddenly see, as the sages say, that there's no form of life on land that doesn't exist on the ocean, except for one. But everything that you see on land also exists in the ocean. But the waters conceal it. Because they conceal it, so you might think that this is really a desolate, barren wasteland. And there's nothing there, and it's also bitter, and so on. Yeah.
Does the reverse apply?
Meaning?
We don't seem to have fish around dry land.
Again?
Does the reverse apply? We don't seem to have fish on dry land.
No, we have fish. The fish on dry land are birds. And in the same way that the fish use their fins to swim through their medium, so the birds fly through ours, which is air. So, but this is a very basic idea that the purpose of the whole splitting was not to get them across to the other side, which they didn't do, but rather to show them what the dry land underneath the covering of the ocean is. So what are these delusions? So we have a story in the Bible with somebody who went into the ocean. There's not very many stories in the Bible that have anything to do with the ocean. This is one of them. One of them is the splitting of the Red Sea, but there the ocean became land. It was parted. You saw it.
Jonah.
Right. There's in general, this is a question in and of itself. How is it that we lived for so many decades and centuries on the Mediterranean, and the Bible has very few references to ocean faring? There's a few. In the time of Shlomo, so they went, it says that they probably went all the way to Peru. This is one explanation of what the place Tarshish is. And that's where they brought the gold from, which makes a lot of sense.
And the Shvatim was...
And Zvulun was so Shlomo had seafarers, King Solomon. But most everybody didn't. And there's very few reference to it. It's a whole question. The reason is apparently because Jews are not good at seafaring. The Philistines held most of the coastline. There was no real access to it. They controlled with the Phoenicians the waters.
When is this?
We're talking about from the time of that they came into Eretz Yisrael until the destruction of the first temple, when the Bible was written. So there's no, except for that time that he so controlled the land. He was in such he had such power that he was able to create a merchant marine. But most of the history of the Jewish people, there's no knowledge of seafaring. Meaning that to be a seafarer, you had to, I guess, join the non-Jews, in this case the Philistines or the Phoenicians or the Greeks or whoever it was during that time, and that wasn't a place that a Jew felt comfortable. And to learn it from scratch was not easy. So the bottom line was that there's almost no seafaring. But there's one story, which is exactly the same way, of a prophet who goes into the ocean, and that's Jonah. and Yonah goes into the ocean. He's going to run away from Hashem, from the prophecy that he's been given, from his life's mission. And it's not because he doesn't want to perform the prophecy, not because he's not aware of his mission. He's very much aware of it. But he's afraid that he'll succeed. And if he succeeds in causing the Assyrians, the people of Nineveh, to do tshuva, to repent before God, so then it'll be a blemish on the Jewish people who are not repenting before God. So he didn't want to he didn't want to succeed in his mission. So he runs away from God, because Nineveh is, you just go north on land, and a little bit to the right, to the east. So he runs away to Yaffo, and he gets on a ship. And he's now not just on the ship itself, but he goes into the depth of the ship, like he's below decks, the bulwarks of the ship. I think it's called bulwarks. I don't know. Anyway, whatever the word is. Umberto Eco, if he's watching from his grave, he can correct me what it's called. Anyway, he's turning his grave. How could you say that? That sounds right. So,
Bowels.
The bowels. Thank you.
Exactly.
Not bullocks. Bullocks is something else. So, Yonah goes into the ship. How do you say a ship in Hebrew?
Oniyah.
So that's a dinghy. Oniyah. What word does that come from? Oniyah.
Oni, like calling out to help, like help, suffering, poverty.
Sorry. Simpler.
Ani.
An oniyah, a ship, is a symbol for the ego, for the I. So really, the way the Zohar explains this is that Yonah is, in his going into the ship and into the bowels of the ship, and then being tossed and churned and eventually being thrown out and being swallowed up by the ocean, and then he gets swallowed up by a big fish, and then he's finally thrown back onto land. This whole story is the story of the soul, which is called a Yonah, which is described as a dove going into the body and suffering the delusion that the body places upon the soul. That's the ocean. The ocean is this world, and the body and the I, the ego, are the ship in which Yonah, the dove, the soul, goes into. So it's a beautiful, beautiful image that explains a lot of things. And then this becomes one of the main images of life. That this whole book of Yonah is about life, which is one of the reasons why we read it on the holiest day, on the afternoon, when everybody's already cleansed, if you want. And we can remember that really what's going on. We're a dove, we're a tzipor nefesh, it's called. Even in the Gemara there's a statement like this, that tzipor nafsho, that if you hit a person, you strike a person in a certain place, you can kill him. Why? Because that's where the dove is, that's where the bird of your soul is. So the soul is described like a bird. That's how you imagine it. So you remember that, Reuven, I'm a soul that came down into this world, and I'm stuck here, and I have to get over the delusions of this world. Where does the Zohar describe all this? Interestingly, it describes it in Parshas Chayei Sarah. Meaning, when it describes that Sarah passed away, and the Torah says she lived 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years, these were all the years of Sarah. Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah. So then the Zohar brings this whole analogy between Yonah going into the ship, into the body, and that being the soul coming into the body and going through the delusions of life. Why? Because it wants to say, this is how the Rebbe's father explained it, it wants to say that Sarah was able in her life to overcome these delusions. That she's the symbol of how do you overcome delusions. So the first thing to ask is, where did we see that Sarah had a delusion? Where was she deluded by anybody, if at all? Right? Why?
She didn't believe what he said.
Right? Because comes an angel in the form of a man and tells her at age 90 you're going to have a child. What does she say? She laughs. She's like, "What are you talking about? You're trying to delude me." What does Avram do? He also laughs. But from God's reaction, you see that the laughter was two different things. That Sarah's laughter was one of, "Don't delude me." Okay, I don't believe you. Irony or whatever you want, sarcasm. And Abraham's was joy. Well, this is great. So you have here a basic difference between men and women, which we'll see in a moment, is very connected to being a man or being a woman, or being connected to your feminine side or to your masculine side, that men enjoy delusions. They think it's a good thing. And they get really into it. And that's why it's easier for them, in a certain sense, to buy into life. But women are like, the idea here is that at some level the woman is always like a little bit suspicious of what's going on. I'm not exactly going to be bought into by this delusion. There's something, so Sarah is the one that's able to overcome the delusions. You have to be a little suspicious.
It's not a delusion of this world, it's a delusion from like God was.
Okay, even that.
Really?
Okay, even say it like this. That at a certain level in relationships between men and women, there's a lot more, call it being oblivious to the situation from the point of view of the male, and there's a lot more suspicion on the side of the female that this might not last. That this might not, I mean, she says, I myself am fully into it, but I don't know if I can trust the other side. There's always this suspicion. Where does this come from? That's the question. And by the way, this is why that on the one hand, I'm saying it in very general terms, it can be a man that also has the same characteristics. But we'll see in a moment that it's also anatomical. It's not just, it's sort of like we're going to give the rectification to Freud. Freud started this whole thing with this thing called hysteria. And why was it called hysteria? Because hyster in Greek is the word for womb. And they used to think that women have a lot more psychological problems, neurological problems, much more than men. Which, by the way, is probably not completely incorrect. There's far more, unfortunately. But we're not going to talk about the womb, we're going to talk about a different part of it. If you know Hebrew, you already know which part of the womb we're going to talk about. Because you have to translate what the word delusion means. How do you say delusion in Hebrew? So we'll say it right now so that maybe you can think about it. Delusion in Hebrew is ashlaya. And the only woman and the only person, individual in the Tanakh, in the entire Bible that says this word, al tashle, don't delude me, is not Sarah, but it's actually Yonah's mother. Okay? She says it to Eliyahu, who tells her, you're going to have a son. Now I'm going to come back in a year and you're going to have a son. What happened? What happened after a year? She had a son. And then Eliyahu kept coming once in a while. And then suddenly, there's this whole story that the son dies. And then she says to him, she says to Eliyahu, she calls him and he comes running. And she says to him, I told you not to delude me. That it couldn't be that I'll have a son. That son is Yonah. And there's another story just like it by Eliyahu's...
And then he resuscitates him next to the
Right,
wife?
right. And then he brings him back to life. The explanation in the Zohar for a situation like this is exactly what... This was actually in this week's Parsha. The beginning of the Zohar in Chayesar is a story about Yonah. The beginning of the Zohar in Beshalach is about Chavakuk, who's the other child who's born at a late age. And this time it's by Elisha, Eliyahu's disciple. And he tells his mother that he's going to be born, and he's born, and he also passes away. And he also has to resuscitate him. He has to bring him back to life. The explanation for both things, for both children, is that they were only the children of their mother, not of the father. Meaning the father contributed, but the soul was entirely feminine. And because it was entirely feminine, it couldn't live in the world. So Eliyahu had to come back, and Elisha had to come back and give them a masculine part. But what does this say? That Yonah was primarily, like you hear his name also, it sounds like that. Yonah doesn't sound like a masculine name. It sounds like a very feminine name. So it's like saying that he had his mother's quality of being with hands off on delusions. He's able to fight delusions. And where did this all start from? It all started from Sarah. She's the first one who's able to fend off the delusions of life.
But in all these examples, they were wrong.
They were wrong?
It wasn't a delusion, it was reality in the end.
In the beginning it looked like a delusion because they died.
But at the end it wasn't, so they weren't.
We said it. But that's exactly what allows you to, in the end, rectify these things. You have to have some suspicion. Put it another way. That if somebody walks through the world, walks through life, and has no suspicion that anything is not the way it seems, they can never come to uncover the delusions here. Meaning, even if they know, even if they do mitzvahs and they do Torah and they learn Torah, they could still buy into the delusions. It's not a cure. The fact that Hashem gave me Torah is not enough. I have to go through something in myself to be able to see the delusion that the world is presenting me with.
So why does Sarah's laugh always painted in a negative light? Okay.
Because it was a feeling that this is not...
It seemed a lack of faith for a moment.
Right? Lack of faith, meaning she doesn't buy into the delusion.
So it's okay to not buy into delusion even if it means you're expressing a lack of faith?
Okay, so here's an example of like curing like.
Mm-hmm.
There's a delusion of the world that you can only heal with the right delusion.
Mm.
Delusion here again means that the facts contradict what you believe. The facts don't seem to say what you're believing in. For Abraham, it was fine, it was great. He's like, great delusion, this is what I'm going to believe in. That in a year from now, I'm going to finally have a son. And Sarah says, no, I can't accept this yet. In that sense, Abraham is ahead.
She wasn't healed.
She wasn't yet healed.
Okay.
Right. She had to have the child.
It is an issue.
It is an issue. And we'll see in a moment why it's such an issue. Okay, but again, this word for delusion is ashlaya. So if you're familiar with Hebrew, so we'll get right to it, there's a part of the womb that's called a shiliyah. What's a shiliyah? The shiliyah is the placenta. And the placenta always develops even if the child doesn't live. The placenta is always alive. If you've seen the placenta, it's like it's huge. It's a serious thing. It's not less. It's about half or 3/4 the size of the baby. And a lot of pregnancies, again, this is where it all comes from. Is the pregnancy real or not? I say that the woman had the suspicion comes from the fact that I'm not sure whether what I have is real or not real, whether it will really live or not be able to live. This is the situation in life.
The amount of placenta.
So it might just be a placenta. There's nothing other than placenta here.
What's the placenta can be? What's the...
So there's a lot of problems that could be with the placenta, but it's also the child can be. Pregnancy is a difficult thing. What is the delusion that Jews believe? We can't call it delusion because but it is a delusion because nothing indicates that it's true.
Redemption.
Okay, Mashiach. That Hashem is going to give birth to a different reality here.
Or in the pregnancy stage.
Right? And so you either, there must be some suspicion because I don't see it.
It sounds like it's okay to have suspicion.
And you have to have some suspicion. But the question is, what do you have suspicion about? Do I have suspicion about the world, or do I have suspicion about what Hashem told me? Which one do I suspect? The idea here is that they're battling in me constantly. That the only way to really cure myself of the delusions that the world presents me with is by introducing God's delusions. That's what we said, that God cures like with like. Then he presents me with other things that sound fantastic. Like, how could they ever be? And he's telling me, if you believe in these, you'll be cured from the delusions that you're suffering from just from the human condition. And again, in Western psychology, I'll never hear about these delusions because maybe they're not delusions. I'll hear about them. When will I hear about them? When they become a psychosis, when they become a bigger problem. But I won't hear about them in the beginning. Nobody will tell me about this at age 7. Be careful about how you see yourself, for instance. And we'll see in a moment. There are 4 major delusions that the world presents me with and that I have to find a way to break out of. If I can't break out of them, then I will waste my entire life. I'll believe this delusion that the world presents me with. Now, the way that it's said today is that there are these great conglomerates of, or secret societies or something like that, and they're holding us all as their slaves, and we're all serving them, and all that. So, might be right, might not be right. It's not like everybody's in some sense aware that something's wrong. There's an angst. Okay? If you ever saw, there was a series of movies called The Matrix. So it started out with the idea that everything's off a little. Okay?
You know that the
really,
studies and it changed.
It changed a lot of people's perception.
Yeah,
but when I saw it, not to say that I could have written it because I'm not an artist in that way. But everything was common sense. You didn't say anything new. I can say it better than you can say it. I just can't make it into a movie. But the level of understanding that there's a delusion going on is much stronger in Yiddishkeit.
More that also that there's somebody else in control.
But the main thing is that there's something off. It's not right. So almost all people feel it in some sense, but it's not clear to them, how do I break out? What exactly is the delusion? So you can make up these stories about secret societies and the, what do they call, the seeing eye, the Freemasons and these groups and that groups. And for some people it's the Jews are controlling. It doesn't matter. These are all the expressions of the same problem, that everybody's aware there's some great delusion going on here. And the question is, what is it? Okay. So what we'll see is that in Sarah's life, we won't get into all of it, because the Rebbe's father's explanation is very Kabbalistic, and it's almost dry, it's technical. And the Rebbe gave a sicha on it, where he explained it in certain ways, and that's where we're actually starting from. So we're not getting too much into the nitty, although I'll bring some of it from the way that the Rebbe's father explains it. But we'll see some points from it. Okay. So the key here is that the Torah divides Sarah's life into 3 parts. It says 7 years, 20 years, and 100 years. So what this is also telling us is that there are 3 delusions, and almost when do you get over them? Meaning the first one you're supposed to get over when you're 7. The second one you're supposed to get over when you're 20. The final one you can only get over fully when you're 100.
You live in delusion from 20 to 100.
You continue to live in delusions, but it doesn't mean, because now I have it written down, and I can learn it, so I can do it much earlier. But to truly get out of it in the natural sense, you can only do it these ages. Meaning this is like a minimal age before which you can't even talk to a child about the fact that there's a delusion going on. Mm-hmm. Okay? What does Rashi say about these 3 ages? He quotes the sages. And the sages say, they explain, that why does it say 7, 20, and 100? Why does it separate them? Because, the order is 100, 20, and 7. Bat mea kebat esrim lachit. That when she was 100, it was as if she was only 20 years old in relation to transgressions, to sins. What's the idea? That until the age of 20, a person is not judged. In Shamayim, they don't judge him. And here we do. from the age of 13 or 12. But in the heavens, he's not judged at all. There's no judgment until then. Why? Because he still has to grow up. But here, meaning in the judgment of man, in courts of law, you're responsible from the moment you're 13. What do you mean you're responsible? If you stole something, or you owe somebody money, or we say that you already have enough consciousness, enough awareness of yourself to know that something is wrong, and so we hold you responsible. We're not going to put you... Well, if you hold by the criminology of the West, putting people in jail, or the criminology of India and putting people into a hellhole, we might not put you with all the adults, but the idea is that you're still responsible. Again, the Torah doesn't believe in this at all. That reforming somebody doesn't work through incarceration. It's not the way to go. So that's the first thing. And then it says that the 20 and 7 is that at the age of 20, she was like at the age of 7, liyofi, in terms of beauty. So it's about something external. Why is a 7-year-old more beautiful than a 20-year-old? I don't know. I've never figured that one out. Exactly. So then it's about the external appearance of things, not the deeper beauty that comes out as you mature, which is far, in my opinion, a million times more interesting. But it's this innocence, like you say, it's completely clean. There's nothing there. Okay, so what is, when the sages say, first of all, we know the sages call this world the world of deceit, alma deshikra. What's the deceit in it? So first of all, you can say in general, because there's these delusions. But when they say it, they mean something very specific. Everybody quotes it just, alma deshikra just means it's a deceitful world. It's full of delusions. But really, there's something much deeper in it. Alma deshikra means that people lie to each other. Okay? It means echad b'peh, echad b'lev. That my face says one thing, my heart says something else. My lips say one thing, and inside I'm thinking something completely different. What's beautiful about a 7-year-old, what you just said? That they're innocent. That's why they're so vulnerable. Right?
They also tell the truth.
They also said it. But they're vulnerable because they don't realize yet that the world is a delusion. Things are not what they seem. First of all, with other people. If you don't learn this properly, if you don't get out of this delusion the right way, meaning it'll hit you where you're not expecting it, when you're a 7-year-old, 8, 9, 10, whatever, 11, that's what all the problems with child abuse is. It creates in you a paranoia. If you don't understand the delusion properly, it eventually deteriorates, or it has a very strong potential to deteriorate into something that prevents you from coming within society. It'll prevent you from being a normal member of society. So in a certain sense, you have to explain this to children. That there's a delusion here. I'm not saying everybody means something bad. I'm just saying what they're saying is not necessarily what they're feeling.
Do you have something before 7 or after?
No, after 7, that's when they can begin to understand this.
That's the delusion.
The delusion is that the appearance is not what's on the inside. The external is not like the internal.
So the black and white is only until 7.
Okay.
I tried this with my daughter. She really held against me forever to take away, rob her of her child.
No, so hold on. The idea here is not that somebody, I don't have to teach my child that the world is evil, that people are evil. I just have to say, no, to understand that not necessarily what they're telling you is what they're thinking. Maybe they're thinking something even better, who knows. But understand the difference.
I remember when my father sat and told me this, and it was interesting. He said, okay, when you walk into a house, when somebody offers you something, let them ask 3 times.
Make sure they really mean it.
Make sure they really mean it.
Okay.
And that was
Another way.
And he said it's because when I was growing up, I didn't have food,
Mm-hmm.
and we were hungry.
So we
needed to make sure.
Okay, exactly.
That they can
Exactly.
really part with
Yeah.
it.
That maybe he can't stand behind
So
what he's
that's a
saying.
good way of
That's a good way.
explaining.
Another way of doing it is with kashrus. Same thing. That if somebody offers you something, you have to ask, what's the kashrus? You have to ask yourself. You have to. Maybe it's not what it seems. Maybe they think it's kosher, but we don't eat this for whatever reason. So it's for them, but it's not for you. You have to create a certain distance from the appearance of the world. And it has to be a healthy distance that allows you to continue to grow and to understand where you are. Because if you don't understand where you are, you will be eaten alive eventually. On the other hand, you don't want to go into the other direction, which is that paranoia, which is everybody's. What does it mean?
Everybody's like,
Right, everybody's after me. Paranoia is really when it comes into already a problem with the ego, where paranoia is, in Hebrew we call machalata redifa, that everybody's after me. The truth is, it's not that anybody's even thinking about you. It's just that each individual has 2 sides to them. What's on the outside and what's on the inside. He's not doing it to hurt you necessarily. That's not his point. He's doing it to benefit himself, which is a very different thing. Don't aggrandize the ego by telling them everybody's out to hurt you. That's not true. It's simply not true. At most, they're not telling you the truth, or they're not expressing what they really feel because it's in their best interest, they believe.
This is why you can't trust compliments or any more than insults.
Well, what?
You can't trust compliments any more than
Right? Exactly.
insults.
So that's what we said, that the ego that's based on compliments or is based on insults, it's all the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Because it has nothing to do with you, or very little to do with you.
Or reality.
So don't be impressed. Don't be impressed. This already gets into the second delusion. But don't be impressed by good words. Don't be impressed by bad words. Midata ishtavut. We're already getting into the second one. But the first one is...
Is it a problem if you break this delusion too early?
Yes.
Okay, so like, is it
If the child is
27?
not ready for
It's
it...
not literally 7.
So, again, that's the idea. That she said, Bat Sheva
what do
Leyofi.
you look for?
That beauty is the innocence of the
How
child.
do you know could it be someone at 7 is still too young for that delusion?
Could be.
What do
But
you
not by much.
What do you look for that where your child starts behaving that you know they're ready?
When you start seeing self-reflection, the moment that they have self-reflection, they have to understand that everybody has self-reflection, that everybody has an inside and an outside. The moment you see them starting to think about what you just told them, why are you acting this way? Why are you acting this way in the beginning doesn't mean anything except for behavior. This is what I'm acting like. The moment that there's a question, an ability to question, why am I doing it this way? What's wrong? That's already self-reflection. It means they're ready for that dichotomy between external and internal.
Because they have it already within themselves.
Right? So therefore they can understand. They have to understand that everybody's the same way. We all have this. So in that sense, you can say psychology starts at age 7. So you have to understand this point, this first delusion, which this everybody knows. There's no big. I haven't told it. There's no big secret here. Okay? But maybe what wasn't so clear is that you have to do it properly at a young age. So that's the first thing. What about the second delusion? So we already started building into it. The second delusion is here at age 20. What is it at age 20? So it says that until the age of 20 you're without transgressions. So you have to understand this statement. And I'm now going, for anybody who's learned Tanya, I'm now going to flip the Tanya on its head. Completely. Why? Because you can take the Tanya for his word. A lot of people don't take him for his word, so they have to do all kinds of kvetchlach to try to figure it out. What is he trying to say? But he's very, very clear. What does it mean to be a choteh, to be somebody who's a sinner? So the Tanya starts off by telling us it's not what you think it is. A sinner is not somebody who has more averos than mitzvahs. That's not a choteh. Who is a rasha? According to the Tanya, it's a person who doesn't know who he is. That's the only rasha that there is. What does it mean? He said, once the Friediger Rebbe was asked, what is the Tanya about? So he said it succinctly in a few words, you've heard it before, and it's don't delude yourself. What do you mean? Here we're not talking about the delusion of the world. Here we're talking about our own delusion that's inside us, which is that I don't know who I am really. I'm not willing to admit my real level spiritually or as a person. I'm not willing to accept my real place in the world. And so I spend my life trying to pursue a delusion that I've deluded myself into believing. So I spend my life pursuing a delusion that I've created because I can't come to terms with who I really am. So we've talked about this infinitely, right? That people suffer from guilt feelings, everything in the world. Why? Because they're not a tzaddik. What does it mean, a tzaddik? How could I have done that terrible thing I did? So, what are you talking about? That's you. Come to get a grip on who you are. Understand that this is a reality. You have to do tshuva about it, but don't turn it into an earthquake.
Is it specifically spiritual or just an understanding?
It's everything.
It's not necessarily a spiritual.
It's everything, but it starts first of all from my self-image. That my self-image is delusional. And we talked about this in terms of how we raise children, right? You tell them, oh, this is such a beautiful drawing, and so on, and all that. And now they're Picasso, and they're Dali, and who knows who they are. Cezanne is nothing, ain't got nothing on them, and so on. And it's all building a self-image that doesn't exist.
But it's okay at that age for them to have that.
No. It says, if by the age of 20, you don't begin to understand that wasn't true, you're in trouble.
You're going to break it at 13.
30 is the new 20.
So I said many times, you don't have to bring them into that place. You can give a lot of support and a lot of self-confidence just through love. You don't need more than that. You don't have to aggrandize them into who knows what for them to feel that they have a place in the world, that they're capable, and so on.
You're saying you don't need to build the delusion, but you're also not
Right.
to break it at 13. Right? We just say
That's okay. I don't break it. I explain it.
Bring them up as such.
You won't be
You can allow them to be human. I think it's really easy.
There's this millennial,
Oh, there, friends. There was this.
What is it?
Can.
I don't know if I saw
That the parents never, ever, ever allow them not to receive a medal, regardless of whether they came in last.
What is that?
There's this whole thing that people our age, my age, I guess a little, my age. I got married late, but people who have my age have children that are 20 now. So these 20, 21, 22-year-olds, they are convinced from day one that they are the best thing that ever lived.
Yeah.
There's never been anything like this.
So it's the power of Mashiach, something good in there?
Is there something good in there? I don't know.
Power that they can change the world.
What do they do with it? Then they belittle, they step on others, or
And I
they're...
don't
No,
see it as
they're shocked by the fact that they're not.
We are these people.
Everywhere.
How-
Everybody's from.
How's the shock manifesting?
My son,
They're called millennials.
How's the shock manifesting? How
What?
does the shock?
actually does not
There's a whole.
get the job that he was
Did you? Yeah. Did you?
very upset about it.
Or say to a failure rejection on any level, yeah.
What do you mean when they don't become a CEO?
Right.
So my 23.
That by the age of 30 they're not a billionaire. That by the age of 30 they haven't conquered the Everest. That by the age of 30 they don't have, I don't know, whatever it is that their self-image that was created in them led them to believe that this, and the dissonance that they have from themselves because of that is unbelievable. As they say, the breakdown of even gender identity in people that age has never been seen before. And there's a percentage of gender. That's what they have now. They started with transgender, and now it's going to transage, which is a whole different,
Why is gender
mishigas. Sorry?
Why is gender related to this?
Because everything about you can't identify with in the end. If you can't see yourself for what you really are, eventually your self-image will break down, and it'll take the whole house of cards with it. Meaning you're going to lose, this is one of the first Torahs of the Baal Shem Tov, he says that many tried to be like Rashbi and failed. There were many great, even great Talmidei Chachamim, or people that deluded themselves that they could be like Rashbi, they could be at the level of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But he says, but when they failed, not only did they not attain his level, but they lost everything that they could have been. Because that's how the psyche works. If I have no ability to see myself for what I really am, I will lose everything. Meaning, when the self-image breaks down, it takes everything with it, everything that could have been also. So gender is broken down, age is broken down, religion, everything is broken down. And they become completely incapable of functioning. And so you've got this whole rebuilding the picture of who you are. So says the Tanya, when you're talking about somebody who's at least a little bit aware of the spiritual side of life, so the first thing to understand is that you're not a tzaddik. Halevai Beinoni. What is a Beinoni? A Beinoni, according to the Tanya, an intermediate, is somebody not who has half and half, but who is aware of his position. That's what it means to be without sin, according to the Tanya. That's why he said, I'm going to turn it on its head. Because he says, Beinoni lo chata v'lo yuchta le'olam. A Beinoni is somebody who never sinned. What do you mean? How can you say that? You just told me that he could have much more than 50% of his actions are wrong. But he knows who he is. He doesn't claim something that some level of spirituality that he doesn't have. He doesn't sit in front of people and tell them, I can be your rabbi, I can be something else, if he's not. Because he knows who he really is. He doesn't come and say, who is this Rabbi Schneerson there? I'm at least as good as he is. Or anybody else for that matter. So he understands what his place is. The moment that he understands what his place is, he's free of that delusion. And again, this requires that he work on himself his whole life. It's not something that you do just once and you're finished. Because you keep deluding yourself. From age 20 and on, you have to work on it. You have to keep working on it.
So sin-free is like delusion-free. Self-image delusion-free.
According to the Tanya, to be sin-free means not to live in the delusion of who you are. Not to delude yourself about what your real position and real capabilities are. Again, because people go into yeshiva and they think, I'm going to be the next Rabbi Akiva Yeager. Said it? Who said? Mela, that's just theoretically just knowledge. Which it's not.
How do you know?
Again, this is it's one of the false pretexts that is told to people who learn Torah, is that learning Torah is just about how many hours you're going to put in. No, it's not about that at all. That's one of the elements, but it's not the main element. The main element is Yirat Cheto Kodemet L'Chochmato. is first of all to have fear of heaven.
That makes you more clever?
No.
Like loose-
The Torah
space
can't
for
stand somebody who has no fear of heaven.
It makes you wise?
No. It makes the Torah capable of entering you. Because Torah is not knowledge in the sense of physics. Okay? It changes who I am. The fact that I know Maxwell's equations and I know how to apply them in every strange situation that my professor in college thought I should know doesn't make me into a different person. But every word of Torah that I learn changes who I am. And that change can only occur if I have Yirat
But
Shamayim.
you can become a Talmud Chacham, though.
What?
You can be super arrogant and become a Talmud Chacham.
Very unfortunate, but it's true.
So maybe you're not a real Talmud Chacham?
You may know a lot.
What's a Talmud Chacham? Someone...
Chokhmah, Yirat Chato kodemet lechokhmato. He's a Talmud of the Chokhmah. How do you become a Talmud? You have to have Yirat Shamayim.
Ronan, how do you know if your mission is real then? Not just an illusion.
That's what the whole world is trying to sell you, a delusion.
But how do you know that you're not just aiming to high and that it's a godly mission and that you're not kidding
You have to
yourself?
work on it. It's not something that
Because
we've said many
it could
times.
be either, and they could switch all the turn. You know, you could go to bed for the right, with your mission for the right reason, wake up, and once your mission for the
So
wrong
you have to
reason.
be careful not to delude yourself.
How do you know if you're actually completely off? No, what I'm saying, not just be
Pray to
careful. In
God,
other words,
pray
if
to
I
God
have
that
this
you
great,
should-
amazing dream, what makes it right? Just because of how, maybe it's wrong.
That's
I'm asking you how to discern. I'm not
So
to
you
do
can't do it
myself,
alone.
tell me how.
You can't do it alone. So you have to have
You
help.
need to pray also for the clarity and that Hashem should show us what it is. that
I'm
we
asking
need
what
to-
the difference is. The one is because you're doing
The
it for
difference
Hashem.
is, Sada, there's a lot of things, but the main difference is that the delusion will take you, first and foremost, out of what you really are. It'll paint you a picture that you can be something that you're not. That's the main problem. It's not even so much whether it's for Hashem or not. But first of all, that I don't know who I
It could
am.
be anything if Hashem helps me.
So, how many people, I just saw this meme like a few days ago on Facebook. It said, life starts when they wrote it as, give up on the dream of what you should be and accept the life that you have. Okay? That people have this delusion about, I'm going to be, because media does this. It completely, right, it turns these people into idols, and you idolize these people who supposedly celebrities that have some dreamy life and whatever and this and that, and you never get around to what's your life about. In a certain sense, if the worst time in the world to be affected by media is from age 7 to age 20. It's the worst time, if you can stay away from it during those years to figure out who you are. And not to have all these crazy stories, superheroes and all this nonsense. And to become a human being, so that would be the best course of action. That's what we try to do. Is there no place for heroes? Of course there is. But human heroes, not supernatural heroes. Okay? Like the Rav explained on last Sunday, that the Mashiach is an industrious and diligent person, but he's not a superhero. He's not infallible. He's a human being, but he doesn't give up. He has supernatural strength in the sense of perseverance, of being industrious, never giving up on what he believes in. But he's not a superhero. He's not going to use magic. Magic is fake. There's even there's a whole question today whether you're allowed to show children a magic show. Why? Because you're misleading them. You're deluding them. And this is possible. I grew up with somebody in Cleveland who went on today to create a company that has magic in its name. And the reason I know very well, because we used to stay up at night when we were supposed to go to sleep. We were 6 and 7 and 8 years old. And we used to talk about this. We knew it was fake, but we said, but there's got to be a way to do it still. So we're now 46, both of us. We were like a month apart, born a month apart. And he went the way of technology. So he's trying today to create magic in your world technologically. But it's not magic. Even though the company is called that.
Do you tease him?
What?
Do you tease him?
No, because I know where he's coming from. We knew it was fake, but
Okay.
he went in the direction of, let me do it with technology. I still believe a lot in technology. But more than that, I believe in the technology and in the psyche, that the real magic is being who you are. That's the real thing. If you can do that today, you're a big magician. Like, how do you make all this media disappear? How do you push it away so that you can grow into who you really are? And I look at my children, so each one has his fortes, each one has good things and bad things, and none of them are like what I wanted. None of them.
They're breaking your
None of them have the mathematical skills, at least as far as I can tell right now. They're all what you call, what does my wife call it? No, dyscalculus. They all have a problem with numbers. And I'm looking at them and I'm saying, how are you ever going to understand quantum information theory? And you're not going to understand how Hashem runs the world. You're not gonna so I give up. And I said they're going to have to understand it in some other way. I don't know how they're going to understand it. I don't know how I understand.
I just read
But-
something that the intelligence goes through the mother.
Really? Intelligence goes through the mind.
Okay.
Chromosomes.
Yeah, they're all very diligent. Well, not all. One of them is like me. But most of them are diligent like my wife.
That's what the school called that.
So that intelligence they got from her for sure. Anyway,
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
The Nefesh Elokit can do the impossible. It's like divine Superman, so to speak, right? It can do anything. It can, the soul, the neshama, it's infinite, it's divine, right?
Does it mean that it does magic tricks?
No, but it can.
What do you mean?
It can weather anything.
Okay.
It can. It
True.
is not bound by.
Not only that, it can bring out from reality
Right.
its deepest, most innermost.
So in making sure the person doesn't have delusional self-image, I mean, can you simultaneously show them that they have a part of them that is supernatural?
Well, no, that's what we said. That there's a delusion that you have to cure, like with life. There are delusions that I have to teach them.
That's the one
These are
that teaches
delusions that the
us.
Torah tells me about. Again, they're not delusions because they're really real, but at least as far as the evidence shows, right now they're still delusional.
It's very nuanced. Like if someone told me I have a part of me that's supernatural, that whatever, it gets enmeshed with the rest of me. Also, I can do anything.
No, you're supposed to think about
How
that
do
part
you
of you, which
separate?
means you should think that you're invincible.
So I don't know.
Because Neshama is invincible.
You are invincible if you identify with the correct
Yeah, but it's
neshama.
very nuanced to tell a 17-year-old explain
No,
which part of you is invincible, which part of you
Never
is
mind,
not.
he's telling us that we're
Hold on.
not invincible. We
But
are.
your neshama is invincible.
Yes, we are invincible. So now please explain this.
So,
We told
I
all
wanna-
along that we're invisible, we should be just like way more powerful than millennials at this point. Expecting to take over the world.
The first thing is that you're yourself. You can get over these delusions.
But I'm not
That's the
myself.
first level of
The
being
me that I
invincible.
identify with isn't real. You've taught us that.
No. If you're
The
still
real
like
me
that,
is invincible.
if the real me can do much more than it's doing right now, and it can believe in things that, on the face of it, are not true. But it doesn't, and again, it can bring out from reality a goodness that is completely locked into it right now. That you look at it and you say, but the world is not this way. So it has very strong capabilities. You can even call them delusional capabilities. But it's not because it's going to do magic. It's because think about it this way. Let me finish. Think about it this way. That to make a Jew who's completely not connected to Yiddishkeit, or is very little connected to Yiddishkeit, to make them into somebody who would start learning and be committed to it, who would raise their children this way, would change their whole lifestyle. That's 1,000,000 times more magical than cutting a woman in half and showing you the two pieces, which you know how they do.
My My son came up with a very big delusion the other day. I'm realizing now it's a delusion. It was that he's not living to his full potential. And the delusion is that everybody is supposed to always live to their full potential, and he's failing in life because he's not living to his full potential.
So,
Right? That's a delusion.
You're saying
There's a
potential
delusion
is a
in it.
delusion?
there's delusion in it.
Why?
Depends.
Feels like
It
that.
depends. It depends. What does he mean by his full potential? If he means by his full
He's
potential,
not using his
then
mind,
I'm
he's
supposed
not
to
using
be.
his-
That I'm supposed to be.
The head of NASA.
Yeah,
An
the head of NASA. So
astronaut?
maybe it is a delusion. It depends on again the
But
delusion.
why?
The first
He feels
delusion you
that
have to
he's
get over.
failing in his work, or he's just not being. It's not using his brain cells. He's not using.
So go do something that does.
I'm saying if
But
someone's
it's
not
But
functioning,
nobody
then that's
knows
okay.
how wonderful he is.
That's already the delusion of that I'm the
Yeah,
only one.
that's it.
That's the self-image.
Very interesting.
So you have to ask yourself where it's coming from. Like, what's the source of it? If it's
By the way, that's one.
Yes.
Before I forget, that's one of the delusions that they talk about, which is about introspection. That most people think they know who they are, but it's a delusion. That's what we just said. It's that actually in psychology is discussed a lot. That people think they're privileged to understand who they are, and yet at most they understand their emotions. They don't understand their functioning cognitively or psychologically. Meaning at most they know what they feel at that moment, but they couldn't tell you where it came from.
Was it possible, or
It's not that it's impossible, but it's almost like you're biased. You're too biased to be able to see it for what it really is. The way that it's explained is like that you're watching an iceberg, and you believe that it's only what you see on the surface. And because you're privileged to see what's on the surface, so you make a mistake in calculating how big it really is, or understanding what its real shape is. Because you see the surface of what's going on. Somebody else who doesn't even see the surface has to take the iceberg as a whole. They have to take all 100% of it, not just the 10% that's above water, and 20% that's above water. So actually, when I look from the outside, I may know more about you than you know about yourself. Not about your emotions. I won't be able to tell you exactly what you feel right now. That only you can do. But I'll be able to paint the picture of where it came from.
Like, what do you mean where it came from?
What is causing you to hate this and this person? Is it something they did to you? Or do I look at it and say, that wouldn't warrant that type of feeling? They must remind you of something deeper. They must be seeing them or hearing them or experiencing something about them is calling up something far deeper. I can see that from the outside, you can't see it.
But it's a personalized thing, or it's a general thing?
It's very
You just
personalized.
analyze emotions.
It's very personalized because every person's emotions come from a different set of... Okay, so getting back to what you said.
I was asking, the question really is that where is this coming from? What's the motivation for it? Then I can discern if this is like an illusion, or meaning, is this to have the medal, or to understand?
No, everybody, until age 20, I'm not ready yet to remove the curtain off the delusion of who I am. It's just a given.
Not right for everything.
Can't do it yet.
Tzaddikim don't suffer with
Maybe.
that. Tzaddikim at 14.
But we just said that if you're saying that somebody's already a tzaddik at 14, if there is such a thing, I don't know what that would mean exactly. But let's say there is such a thing, it would mean, according to the Tanya, it means that he's very aware of who he is.
So it's not about age, it's stage.
Okay.
At this point.
But just take it as a given that it was very hard for us to accept who we really are. We live in a delusion. That's age 20. It's called Kebat Esrim Lechet. Now, what's the important thing about it? And this is something, again, that people read the Tanya and they go in the wrong direction. They hear that, how does this Tanya start? That before you come into the world, before Yonah comes into the ship, he's told, Mashbi'in oto tihi tzaddik ve'al tihi rasha. He's made to vow, to swear that he'll be a tzaddik who won't be a rasha. And then it tells them, "Afilu kol ha'olam kulo omrim lecha tzaddik ata," even if the whole world is deluding you and telling you you're a tzaddik, look at your great pictures, look at everything you're doing so great. Heyeh beinecha kerasha. Be in your eyes as if you're the opposite, you're a Russia. But they miss the one letter that's so key here. And this is why it's so important. This is why it's at age 20. What do you say? Heyeh beinecha kerasha. What does that mean? It doesn't mean be in your eyes a Russia. Be in your eyes as if. Ke. Ke means dimyon. As if you were. Kafa dimyon. And it's equal to 20. At the age of 20, really, to break this illusion, the only way to really see who you are is to say to yourself, as if I'm a Russian.
Another delusion.
Okay? It's to heal the delusion that everybody's telling you, meaning every time they tell you something good, you believe, you take it as if the truth is exactly the opposite. But it's only as if.
What do you really?
The important point here, it's only as if people come out of the Tanya, they think they're Rishaim. No, it's a technique. The technique to find yourself is every time that something works, it's, but I'm a Rasha, so how did it work? Hashem did it. Give the credit to Hashem. That's one of the techniques. Somebody comes and aggrandizes you. You say, what? I'm as if I'm a Rasha. Really, who deserves the credit? Who deserves the fame? Hashem, not me. Don't credit me with this. At least internally I have to do that. If I don't do that, I won't find myself. So it's a technique. It's not telling you who you really are. No, he's not telling you you're Russia. Of course not. Because he made you swear to be a tzaddik. How could you then be a Russia suddenly? That whole statement in the Gemara doesn't make sense unless you understand this point, that it's kerasha. Kerasha means that it's only a technique in order to really find yourself.
That line, I mean,
Every time, credit it to Hashem. Credit it to Hashem. Because I myself certainly am not capable of these things.
No, but it's true. It's Hashem.
You said it. But you have to do
But
it.
it doesn't have to be good.
But the only way to really give it to Hashem, what he's saying is "Heyeh beinecha kerasha." You have to accept yourself as if, Chaz v'shalom, you should believe you really are. But as if I'm a Rasha, I'm not capable of any of this. And then you'll begin to find yourself.
Is it only too good and bad? It could be anything, right?
Yeah,
I think someone associates you with.
Anything that people make you out to be something that you're not.
Right.
In a certain sense, it's even more than that. I don't want to get into it right now because it might confuse everything. But let's leave it this way. What happens at age 100? This now. What happens at age 100? There's something that happens about 100. It doesn't say what it was like. It doesn't say that 100 is that something else is like 100. What happens at 100? But from the sages, we know what happens at age 100. What happens? It's like as if he's out of the world. What is it? At age 100, it's as if you break through the final delusion. What's the final delusion? And this is the hardest one, because it's only at the age of 100, it's almost like saying that really you don't get it until the end. You spend your whole life doing something, falling into this delusion, buying into it, and it's only when you leave the world that you suddenly realize, oh, what an idiot I was.
That's
What is it? And people know this now. It's written all over Facebook. It's written everywhere.
what?
They realize I should have spent more time with my family doing things that were important to me and not pursuing my career. The big delusion of the world is that the world tells you, you need me. You need me to survive. Meaning, only by investing in me will you have a life. If you invest in anything that's not world, again, is where Hashem is hidden. If you invest in anything that's godly, what does godly mean? Godly means your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your neighbors, with your community. It means the Torah that you learn, all these things that you don't get paid for. Bottom line. Not worth anything. They're not worth the money.
But happy one.
The world convinces you. It takes hold of you until it mefateh otcha. How do you say mefateh? What? Mefatot misha. It entices you.
Right.
Not the exact word, but close enough. Okay, into believing that happiness and life and all these things are dependent on one thing. You have to invest in me.
Where do you see this?
Whereas me is the physical, how much money you make, what kind of home you have, and so on and so forth.
Where do you see this in Sarah? Like, how did you decide this is the delusion? I'm saying, like, the other ones make sense, but
No, the other one.
in the sin, I'm just curious where this.
Where's it in the Sarah?
That makes sense, but like, where does
That's what the sages say about age 100. That the person, avavu batel min haolam. He's beyond the fakeness of the world. He sees that this is not what it's really about. Everything that I was led to believe is a delusion. I should have spent. Now again, it's not saying that you don't need to eat and you don't have to drink. It's not saying that you don't have to live somewhere. It's not saying any of these things. There is a level in which you have to go into the ship. If you don't go into the ship, you drown in the ocean entirely. You have to have something. But that's all you need. Something. You don't need everything. Don't buy into that delusion that you need it in order to survive. Really, what will make the only thing you'll remember in the end is all that you didn't work on in terms of matter, in terms of physical matter. It's only the emotional, the spiritual. That's all that will be retained anyway.
So the Haredim have got that down well. They do
Who said?
well. They don't go to work. They hang out and learn all day.
If they hung out and learned all
And
day,
they
they'd
have
be,
their house in between.
the Rebbe saw this and said that's not what this generation needs.
But I'm asking you why. It
He
sounds
said
perfect.
this generation needs people not to invest in themselves, but to invest in other people.
Because you get money to give away.
That the money shouldn't be the concern. That he goes on shlichus, he doesn't ask, how rich will I be after 10 years? When somebody goes into a profession today, they ask, so what is the long-term outlook for my salary? Okay? After 5 years as a lawyer, will I be making $10,000 a month or $20,000 a month? And then he thinks about it and he says, well, if I went into biotech, it's better. Why? Because it's true, after 5 years I'll only be making $7,000, but the long-term employment opportunities are better, because in biotech they don't fire anybody. Whatever, that's all he's looking at. This is how I'm going to run my life.
So what should he be looking at? Just so he's brilliant.
According to the Rebbe, where am I needed most?
So he should go into biology to change the world.
Not to change the world. That's one of those statements of the delusion of who I am. I can change the world, I can't change the world.
Can you change my little...
I can change my part of the
The
world.
soul wants
If
to
you have an art in
My
biology,
part of the
you're a
world.
brilliant
You
biologist
contain
at
it.
school.
What?
You're a brilliant biology at school. It seems obvious you should go into
Okay,
biology.
okay.
So what are your motivations there?
So, like most people, they come to the recognition later in life. It didn't matter really how much money I made. It mattered what my contribution was. Meaning, if you can go into Teva, which doesn't do anything new, just makes money off of other people's inventions, or can I go into, I don't know, Gilead or something like that, and invent new remedies for things? Okay? Which one? So Teva pays better, maybe, but the other company I have more satisfaction because I'm doing something for other people. I'm also getting paid. It's not a sin to get paid. I mean, you have to live. But what I'm interested in is the quality of what I'm doing.
In terms of not living a lie, on the one hand you have to realize that everything's not real. On the other hand, you have to, if you live on your shirt and everyone wears blue because the rabbi said they should, and you try to wear red, you're just not going to get ahead on that shirt, for instance. It's just useful to wear blue and you'll have more clout. So you have to buy into the lie in order to survive. Because if you have more money, you have a prettier house, more people are going to come to your house. To your house for sheer revenue.
Well, if that's right.
Who said that?
So that's not one of the big delusions. It's a little thing.
No, but I'm saying we all you know, we all get dressed, put on makeup. That's a big lie. Well, I don't do that so well. But most
Like,
people.
why do we show up, you're saying? Like,
Why we have to live in that lie. We know that it's nonsense, but we all do it all the time. And we can't
Again,
lie.
these
We
are
don't
not
have
big
to-
delusions. These are not the three big ones.
But that's a massive delusion.
There's a
That's
bunch of
massive
minuscule
delusion.
ones.
They're small ones.
The whole world is.
And by the way, you know that it's a lie. When we're talking about these three, people don't know. They don't know. They don't accept these facts. A child doesn't know yet about the chok, about the inside and the outside. He lives in the delusion still. A 20-year-old will continue throughout his life believing that he's something that he's not. He buys into that delusion 100%. He doesn't know to say, most of the people in the world don't know how to say my self-image is different than who I am. So few people know how to say that. I'm not just saying say it. Like I said, anything that happens to you, give the credit to it. Can you do that? Can you give the credit to Hashem? As long as you can't give the credit to Hashem, you still don't know who you are. And certainly, most people have no clue that life is not about what size your house is. They don't get it. They're a long way from that. They know it says somewhere, yeah, it's a nice thing to think about once in a while. But really, in the end, how much are you going to give me? How much am I going to have? Very hard to break out of these three. And then we'll get into the fourth one, which is the extra one, which is sort of like a bonus. And you'll see that everybody's lost.
what?
Almost nobody knows how to get out of the last one.
Well,
When's
sounds like
that?
what age is
I
that?
thought he died. Like,
No. So then we said that after, it says that she lived 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. We said there's a final statement, Shnei Chayei Sarah. The years of Sarah's life. Why does it have to say again years? It said 100 shanim, 20 shana, ו7 shanim, Shnei Chayei Sarah. So it says 3 times years, and then it finishes with another phrase with the years, the years of Sarah's life. Why repeat years again?
everything together.
So says Rashi there, Shekulam Shavim Letova. That they were all equally good.
She had one delusion and do it.
That there was one delusion that affects you throughout your entire life that she was able to get out of. What's that delusion? That's the worst delusion of it all. That you have time.
Have time?
So sad.
Do you have time? I have time?
I don't understand.
Why is it sad? It's the reality. We all feel,
You can't live like you don't have time. You won't be able to do anything with it.
it's a delusion. You have to fix it with something else.
So you need it.
Is it the truth that
That's
you
why
don't
you
have
break
time?
it clearly your whole life.
Is it the truth that you don't have time, or is it not the truth?
It's
Do you have infinite time?
No.
You don't. You
But
said
what I'm
that. So
saying
first
is
of all,
the
it's
other
true.
ones, they give us a time when we break it. This one clearly is never given the time to be broken.
Because
When
you
do
can
it,
suffer it. You can suffer from that even when you're 100. Even when you've broken through the big delusion of life, which is that the material world is what it's about. Even then, you can still suffer from the fact that I have plenty of
Yeah,
time.
but while you're suffering
You
from a
don't.
delusion, it's because you also need it.
How-
Until 7, you suffer from a delusion, but you need that delusion to survive. What
No.
I'm saying is maybe we suffer from this global life delusion because we need it to function.
So what? So
let's not
even
break it.
even though you need it, no. But the whole point is that you have to break it every single day.
Oh.
How do I know that you have to break it every single day? Because it says, Shuv yom echad lifnei mitatcha. Do tshuva one day before you die. What kind of a statement is that? How do I know when the day I'm going to die is? Every day.
And what does it mean, Akol Shavim L'Tova?
That they're all equally good. How are they all equally good? Because you did tshuva all the time. This is the important thing. This is where it really, this is where the delusion has a delusion within it. The delusion within the delusion is that even when I tell somebody, but is it true that you don't have infinite time? They say yes. So what do they feel? It's so sad. Oh, my life's almost over. That wasn't the point.
No, just you're going to put me in panic mode.
That
I'm
wasn't
gonna
the
have a good
point.
day. I
So
don't
you're
wanna
in
be-
another
That's so
delusion.
sad.
What's your delusion? That I have so much to do because really the world is all there is.
If you want my day to be
No.
meaningful, don't tell me you're on a
No, not at all. So what do Chazal say? That's the main thing. That what you have to do is do tshuva. That's all. That the only thing you won't have any more time for is tshuva.
So what is tshuva?
The fact that I won't be able to do A, B, C, and D, which I've planned, is meaningless. That's part of which delusion? The second one. That I imagine something that I'm not. How do I know what I am? It's at every moment that this is what I am. This is it. There's nothing else here.
The other day, there's a rabbi that fell on his side when he was doing Abdallah last week in Ashdod. One knee. It was on Facebook. Okay, and supposedly fell on his side, and he said that there are 5 gates to heaven.
Good.
And he had a conversation with Eliyahu Navi, and he begged him to leave one open, and that everybody should right now do tshuva.
So,
Okay, so what is tshuva?
okay, so what is tshuva? No? What does it mean to do tshuva?
Fix something. You're doing it.
Do your best. Well, we always do our best.
No, tshuva is not about doing my best.
Because we're not going to be perfect
Tshuva-
no matter what.
Tshuva is first of all,
Turning to Hashem.
Like in that
It's turning to God.
mentally, I don't know.
What is really tshuva? I
But
sat
it's
there
it,
and I didn't think about this for a
To
while.
be in relationship with Hashem.
But we
Going
always
Okay.
are.
Regressing.
so
being
what
a
do you
baby.
need in order to be in a relationship with
You have to
Hashem?
do
Vulnerable.
hakmar and Hosanna.
You have to know yourself.
You have to repent for what's wrong, that's all.
You have to
If you do it,
And that's for your
Hashem, ani lo
sorry.
beseder. And I want to be beseder from now on, that's all.
There was
Don't put it off. Do it every single day. Until now, I haven't been
Only once a
okay.
day?
Every day. How many times a day? I don't know how many times a day you need it. But every time, and not to let your life be lived without looking at the past and saying, I wasn't right. Chatati l'Hashem, I made mistakes.
Can we learn video one day?
So I think we did once. So one time.
there was a I don't remember.
That's really what you have to be capable of doing. That's what you need time for. You don't need time for anything else. Don't worry about it. If you're worrying about how much time you have left, so then you're worrying about, again, the self-image, which says I should have been able to do A, B, C, D, I have this whole list of things I have to do. And what are you talking about? You're not the master of doing things.
But I think your neshama
The fir-
feels that.
No.
Your neshama feels similar
The
to
neshama
yourself,
feels-
but in a rectified
The
way.
neshama feels that it has to do whatever it was sent to do, not more,
Right.
not less.
But if the neshama
So the
doesn't
neshama
feel like it's
doesn't
done it
have-
yet, then
then
it
it-
still wants to be here.
The neshama doesn't have a sense of there's a list of 15 different things I should have done and I haven't done it
Not
yet.
a list.
It's not living like
something
that.
my soul came for that I haven't done it yet. Please don't take me yet.
Beseder. What do you mean my soul hasn't done
I
yet?
haven't raised my children
I-
yet.
I'm not there yet.
If
So
the-
that's the thing.
Whatever it is.
It's just
You don't have to want to die.
What?
You don't have to want to die.
Why would you want to die?
Let's say this whole
I don't
divine,
think you have-
this divine mission we speak about, the bitachon, you have something you came for and you don't feel like you've done it yet. Why is
Yeah,
that
but
a
that
problem?
doesn't
Beseder, you feel.
So,
you.
well, your neshama, I don't know.
Well,
I mean, actually, I have no sense of my soul, so then I'm...
So again, that this will be. Remember how we? I don't know. You weren't there, but when we talked about the medrash of the eagle, the simple thing that comes out is that when a person's about to pass away from the world, he should not give up on what he feels he should have been able to do. You never give up on it. What do you mean? You think that doing again? What's your problem? That you think that you did it. You're not willing to give the credit to Hashem.
Physical, whatever that
You're not willing to give the credit back to God. So that's why it's all dependent on you. That's the achrayut. That's the, again, like, I have to raise my children. Who said you have to raise your children? I'm not saying that you
The
should.
divine dream has to be manifest in this world.
No. That the responsibility is not yours in the end. It's true at this moment you have to be a decent human being and so on, you have to be responsible for what you do and so on. But the responsibility of getting things finished, grandchildren in 20 generations from now. Maybe they need me. So who's responsible? So what? So, and this is the, parents that were on, like my wife's mother. When I try to imagine what did she feel, when we try to imagine what did she feel, when she knew she was passing away, and she's got little kids, what do they feel? What do they feel? There's only one thing they can feel, that it's not up to me. They really give the credit back to Hashem. So I'm not saying you can sleep in because you don't have to take care of your little kids or whatever. That's not what it is. Right here, you have the duty, Hashem gave it to you, do it. But the overall picture is not yours. There's no such thing. You can't finish everything. The whole thinking that I can finish, that I have something more to do, there's something wrong with it. It's not to say that I shouldn't want. I can want. But it's not that this is essential to who I am. Essential to who I am is first of all to do tshuva. That's what's really essential.
The Rebbe Mashiach essential to who he was.
They said it, and he tried, and he tried, and he tried. Said.
So he did.
So he didn't give up until the day he passed away. That's all.
Right.
And that's why it still lives, because he didn't give up.
And he was pain.
I'm going to say otherwise. That if you don't feel this way, you'll give up far earlier than you should have. Meaning that you won't carry it through all the way. If you can't give the credit back to Hashem, that He did everything that I did until now, then in truth, when push comes to shove, you'll give up. And push comes to shove can be a negative situation that's difficult to surmount, and it could be just passing away. You'll give up on what you called your mission. To really cling to your mission, you have to be willing to do tshuva. What does tshuva say? Everything I did is Hashem's. It's not mine, first of all. The good things. The negative things are mine. That's tshuva. That's the beginning of tshuva. And you have to do it every single day.
Not necessarily will it feel good.
What?
Not necessarily will it feel good.
Of course it will feel good.
It will.
Because the tshuva right away cleanses
You
you.
can still be pained and struggle and...
No, if you did tshuva really, if you accept, again, if you don't know who you are, and you have to admit that I did avirot, that I did some sins, so you're right, it's going to pain you. But if you understand who you are, if you've come to terms with who you are, I have an animal soul, I'm prone to doing everything wrong, there's nothing new about it. That's part of the picture.
To the Mashiach, I say with the Rebbe, he was deeply pained by it. Like, even though he knew in the end, okay, he tried and tried and tried, but...
You should be serious about what you want to do.
Okay.
But in the end, you being you... I'll say it another way. Stranger. If somebody looks at the Rebbe and says he was all fake, you know why? Because he didn't bring Mashiach. So the whole thing was one big forgery. It was all Madat Panim. It was all just one big show. So he doesn't... You see that he himself has no idea about what it means to deeply believe in something and pursue it, in spite of the fact that you may not be able to complete it. The fact that I wasn't able to complete it doesn't mean that I didn't deeply pursue it. Doesn't mean that I didn't feel that this was what my life was about. So this is what it was about. And this is as far as Hashem lets me take it. And it will continue on with other people.
Yeah, it's not based
But
on
exactly the
science.
people who say that this is all, see, the whole thing was one big nonsense. Why? I don't think they say he's a forgery, but they say like the whole thing was just one big illusion, one big delusion.
Who said?
Someone said, I
There's
just
a lot
read
of
in
people
my
like this.
Rebbe, that since when he started talking about Mashiach,
Now he's become delusional. Okay. The last 2 years he went off his rocker. So they don't understand what it means to really believe in something and to pursue it, even though you know at the very end that it's not up for you to complete it. Of course.
Amped up his passion.
Of course.
He did
Of
see
course.
it connected to time.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
What do you mean?
Of course. It doesn't mean
Why are you amping it up? Because you're getting old? Like, what do you mean? We're not meant to think like that.
that too.
I thought we're not meant to
That
think
too,
like
because as far as he's concerned, he doesn't have. But from a lot of reasons, we know that that's not what he felt. Why he felt that there were other reasons.
Why he amped up the
Okay.
campaign.
Why he felt
Why?
what?
There's a lot of theories that were given. We can discuss them some other time. They're not so essential here. So let me continue with.
Can I ask one thing? Where does it say Sarah, her mistake, her delusion was time? She thought she had time.
No, it's not. She conquered all these delusions. She conquered all these. That's the summation of her life. 100 years, 20 years, and 10
But what
and
did it
20.
have to do with time? You said
The
something
last
about-
one, the last delusion is throughout life. It's not. It doesn't start at a particular age.
It's not time sensitive.
It's always
And
deluding me.
what was connected to Sarah?
It says that all her days are equally good. How were they equally good? That every day she did tshuva. The main thing that you may not have time to do is not whether you'll bring Mashiach or any of that. It's whether you'll do tshuva. The main thing that you may not have time to do is not about how long you'll raise your kids for.
So it's not really.
It's whether you're going to do tshuva. That's the main thing that you'll run out of time for. If you run out of time, it's only for that. Every day has to be spent doing that.
The delusion is that you have time.
Right. So people say it in the sense of, again, I have plenty of time, I'll learn when I have time, I'll learn when I this, when I that, when I that.
Also to
Just a
sin,
friend of
yeah.
mine,
People plan on sinning just a little bit more. before
What?
they- People also plan on sinning just for a few more days until they.
exactly.
So procrastination is a sin, a big sin.
It's not a sin, it's a delusion.
Well, it's opposite of tshuva.
It's not that it's opposite of tshuva. If you don't do tshuva, you're falling into the delusion of having time in the worst possible way. You can fall into it in other ways.
Tshuva, you need
But
time.
tshuva is the main thing.
Will doing teshuva make you do stuff now?
Yes, because I said, what does it mean to do tshuva? Do tshuva is like almost the beginning of finding who I am really, and what my life is really about. Okay? What does it mean to do tshuva? So people said here that it's being close to Hashem. So what do I mean by being close to Hashem? That I know what Hashem wants from me. How do I come to that? There's only one way that I can really know what Hashem wants from me. If I'm not delusional about who I am, I'll be able to come to do anything that Hashem expects from me.
So that's why Hashem makes you suffer, to force that thing home.
Suffering. Leave it
To
alone.
force that idea home.
So we're talking about
Realize
delusion.
how
Like the one at
long
age
you
20.
suffer.
Sounds like the one at age 20.
Okay. So now,
Isn't it the same?
what time is it?
So maybe that's what I mean when you say old people get.
It's 5 to 12?
Yeah.
We said that you have to have a delusion to take out the delusions. You cure like with like here. So the main delusion is Mashiach. The main delusion is redemption. But let's give an example of the delusion. Like for instance that
Why is Mashiach a delusion?
because nothing in the world
Points
presents me with facts that this is what's going to happen. There's nothing. You need prophecy to figure that one out. In fact, you need even more than prophecy. You need chokhmah. And only the sages figured this one out.
You can figure that from Chochmah?
No, it said that even prophecy wasn't enough. That even the prophets don't openly speak about it enough. It's only once it comes into the time of the sages who didn't have prophecy anymore, that the prophecy became chokhmah, that they could really get into this topic. They could really understand what's hiding behind reality.
I guess that's what it means when it says Elokut
Yeah. Lukud b'pshitut. It's to understand that it's exactly the opposite from what you see. So, let's give an example. So, for instance, what's going on? What do we understand in Israel? They don't understand in the rest of the world. We understand the 7-year-old. Okay, we're at least 7-year-old. Why? Because we understand that people are not what they've seen. So we have the saying, kabdeu v'chashdeu. That on the one hand you have to give a person respect, on the other hand you have to be suspicious. What are we suspicious of? So in Eretz Yisrael it's very simple. It's all it has to do with security. That you can never take things for what they seem. What about the rest of the world? Complete in a delusion. What's a delusion? That everything's dandy. It's all nice and dandy. All the Muslims are friends. And all they want to do is enjoy Amazon. That's why they're coming to the West. That's their only purpose. So that's it. They live in a delusion. So slowly they're coming out of the delusion. Some people at least are coming out of the delusion. And so Trump wins in America, which I don't know if it's a good thing or not, because maybe he holds on to other delusions. Maybe he's also he has other problems. But at least this delusion he doesn't have anymore. You see, this is not what you're saying. You guys are crazy. They're not coming here for the cars. They're coming to take over. That's what they want. And so you got Geert Wilders in Holland, and he's going to win the elections there. And maybe Marie Le Pen will win, and so on. And suddenly the world begins to come out of its delusions. But they're all stuck in the delusion of who they are. It's very hard to break out of it. But let's give the real pain is that even the concept of delusion has become a delusion. I'll give you an example. That to tell a patient that you think has 6 months to live, to hide that from them is to delude them. To tell them, even worse, you're going to get out of this when the statistics say that they won't, that's a delusion.
Doctors don't say that.
Yeah, they do. They have to tell you exactly what it says.
Doctors don't delude you.
Right. They say that that's a delusion. To tell somebody, even not to tell them, is a delusion. Why? Because that's the real reality. The real reality is that this is what's going to happen. What do they not understand?
But there's God. You don't know what's going to happen.
That itself is a big delusion. How do you know that this is... where did you get this from? The Rebbe kept shouting about this, that the delusion is telling somebody that who gave you the right to tell them? How do you know what's going to happen?
It reminds me of the story
Where do you know
of
this
Sarah
from?
Esther.
And so they can't use what's the right delusion. Think good and it will be good.
Why is that?
That's a good delusion.
Why is that a delusion?
Baruch Hashem, you already don't even know that it's a delusion. But most people think that to be optimistic means...
You're in denial or something.
to be an optimist means to be deluded. What did we say about the divine soul changing my reality? That the divine soul is always looking with a good eye on reality. And so it can bring out of reality its good parts. And that's what reality is waiting for. That's who it wants to marry. The reality wants to marry somebody with a good eye. Somebody who looks at the world the way Hashem looks at the world. With a kind eye, with a good eye, who believes that he's good. Who's optimistic about it. Okay? The Rebbe used to look at people. He always looked at them with a good eye. He never said, I criticize you because of the... Right away see how you can be good. And I'll describe to you right away how you can be a good person.
You're saying people think that statement is a delusion?
But they think that this is a delusion.
Because-
To be an optimist is to be deluded.
But someone can be dying and accept that they're in a dying process.
We're not talking about somebody who's
still be
dying.
in a state of thinking good.
Okay, no.
Right, so you don't have to hide what the doctor said. I actually think people prefer
No,
to know
because the
that
moment that you say that to somebody, you've killed them. Because most people, again, they can't get out of... They can't get... It's very hard for them, for everybody, it's very hard to come out of this feeling that now all is lost.
Yeah, but that's it. They're not contradictory.
So in the end, facing reality is not contradictory to succeeding.
Right?
Even if it means that you're going to pass away in 2 days, or 1 day, or right now at this moment.
Right.
Still, even though that's true, what does it mean to think good? That even at this moment I will still be saved. Even at this moment, when everything is over.
You mean I will be saved? I will live forever.
Come to life. Mashiach will come right now. And that'll be that.
You know, when I saw patients in the hospital, they didn't really want to hear that kind of stuff.
Is that it?
They wanted like humanity to sit with them and just say, this is what it, not in depression, just in reality. And be a soulful voice in the reality and the soul, but not like tomorrow you're going to be all better, even though you're in stage 4 cancer. Like, that's not really, I don't know.
So you because they feel like everybody else that it's a delusion. To think optimistically is a delusion.
It's not optimistically.
It is.
No, because like,
'Cause there is a way
example,
out.
the story in the Holocaust, like they were dying, and like you see in the pictures, their eyes. I understand that, but that's not fighting reality. That's saying reality is this, that I am still infinite. But to start saying I'm also going to live past stage
Why
4,
not?
even when
Why not?
that's already playing with something very personal. Let the person decide if they want to say.
I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm saying that that's what it really means. To be delusional in the good sense means that even if it seems everybody in the world tells you, it's the same thing with your self-image. It's the same problem. It's a delusion. Everybody in the world tells you did this, and you're to take credit for this, and you're so good at this and that, and you have to keep saying to yourself, this is all a delusion.
But I can't tell the other person that. They have to say to themselves.
Say them.
Right?
I have to teach them how to say it to themselves.
I'm just saying,
I
if
can't
someone's
say it
sitting
for
there
them.
and dying,
Obviously-
I can't be like, you're going to live forever.
Obviously, I can't. But I also can't say the opposite.
No.
Yeah, that was the pain. The pain is that the delusion has already become the opposite of what the delusion is. Meaning now to be delusive means to be pessimistic. That's really what it means. The only real reality is the pessimistic one. Everything else is a delusion. So everything's been switched. Mamash afuch. But it's the same thing with who I am. The only real me is a hunky-dory, perfect, so on and so on. That's the real me. Okay. If you think otherwise, you're not raising your child right because they're going to think bad things about themselves. You can't see that by teaching them that you're putting them into the worst delusion.
This is because all those people who are controlling the universe with their happy thoughts, they also seem
It's
positive.
It's
It's a good thing.
if they think they're controlling the universe, it's a very big problem. But if they think they're bringing out of reality meaning that what Hashem put there, that they're just Hashem's eyes in this case, so they need to see good things. But otherwise, if they see good things, I'm very happy. This is how
Sometimes
they
that's
should be.
exactly the same thing, but they mean different things. Some of
This
them
is how
are
they should be. On the other hand, to understand that when somebody comes from Syria, so he may not be interested in doing good things. Not to be delusional. It says that Chassid is first of all pikech. He has his eyes wide open. You can't fall into this delusion of a 7-year-old and be innocent that everything is fine. It's not. But how do you combat the delusions with other delusions, with the right ones? So when the Malach came and told Avram, you're going to have a son, he immediately bought into it. In other words, the feeling that we have to have is we're all pregnant with Mashiach. We're all pregnant with goodness. It's not just a placenta. Here you have to understand, it's not just a fake pregnancy. The world is not a fake pregnancy. It's real. It'll really come out. Mashiach.
That's not the real
But
ones.
I thought you said, what do you mean? Sometimes there's just a placenta.
It's almost who in the Tanakh was called by a name that's similar to Ashleya, to placenta, to a delusion.
Shlei and
Almost.
Shiva.
Almost. Close. She very much wanted to marry him.
Oh,
One
she?
woman.
What?
Tamar. Tamar very much wanted to marry Sheila, she's called. And the Mashiach comes out of him. What was going on there? So eventually she had to cure the delusion with the delusion. That she played on Yehuda a delusion. Okay? Because you said, it turned out that Sheila really was a delusion. She really wasn't supposed to marry him. She was supposed to marry Yehuda directly. So, but because she believed in this very strongly, that led her in the end to do the right thing. So it's a complex topic with her, but that's the basic idea that to really get rid of the bitterness, you have to buy into the right delusion, into the right ashleya. Tamar means to tammar, that the bitterness is over. So to really get to Tamau, you have to buy into the right delusion. What's the right delusion? That I'm going to give birth to Mashiach. It's a delusion because nothing in reality says this is true.
What is a personal redemption? Mashiach doesn't come. What is that?
That I'm able to do my shluchus in the world. That I'm able to speak my heart. That's personal redemption. Say them.
To speak your heart or to do what you're supposed to do your mission?
Let's go back to Yonah. How did Yonah know what his mission was?
Hashem told him.
What does that? Say that in another word.
He had a bus call.
He had a prophecy. That's what it means that every Jew has to become a prophet. To be a prophet means, it's called Navi, is a niv sfatayim. Means that his lips speak. What do I speak? My mission. And right now, my heart can't reveal my mission to my lips. Liba lepuma logalia. I can't divulge it completely. To really get to a state of personal redemption means I become a prophet. That's all it means. You don't have to. Everybody is a prophet. Doesn't mean that your prophecy is relevant to me. So your prophecy is, first of all, relevant to you. To know my mission is to be a prophet. That's what it means.
Just to know it.
Okay, just to
Not
know
even
it.
to
To
do
be
it.
able to say it to
Just
myself.
to say it.
To be able to say to myself, this is what I'm here for.
Why does, like, what, I don't get it, there's no next stage. Like, the Rebbe didn't just say, well, Mashiach, he campaigned for it, he made things happen.
That's his. That's his.
What I'm saying is, after you say it, then there's something that happens.
You do
it,
something.
right.
Okay, so
But
you have to be
it
able to
sounds
say
like
it.
if it ends at the knowledge point.
No, it doesn't make it
I
sound.
think
I'm
they
just saying that
knowledge-
that's how it starts.
That's the key.
You have to be able to
But
say,
what
like
I keep
Yonah was
saying
able to say.
is, I get stuck at the manifesting part, and you're like, that part's not important. Just
I didn't say
make
that.
Sure you know who
Why
you
did
are.
I say that?
You
That's
say
not.
that's not the point.
No, we
The-
said, can you give the
Keep
credit?
saying that, don't get
Redemption,
caught up in the
even when
manifestation.
Mashiach comes, that's not the goal. The goal is not Mashiach. Mashiach is just a stage.
Okay.
So being able to say your mission is just a stage.
Right, you really want to manifest.
Then you have to actually do it.
But every time I
When
go through
Mashiach
that
comes,